All right, so today we're going to be tackling something pretty huge, consciousness.
Yeah?
I mean, it's like the foundation of everything, right? If we weren't conscious, there'd be no world, no self, no nothing.
Totally. Like, without consciousness, there's literally no experience at all.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be exploring some ideas from Anil Seth.
Oh, cool.
He's a neuroscientist who gave this awesome TED Talk.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
And he's got this really mind-blowing way of looking at how consciousness works.
Right. Seth's approach is super interesting because he kind of turns the whole perception thing on its head, you know?
Okay, so instead of just taking in the world as it is, you're saying our brains are actually creating their own version of reality.
Exactly. He talks about the brain as a prediction engine. Like, think about it. Our brains are stuck inside our skulls.
Right.
No direct access to the outside world.
Uh-huh.
All it gets are these streams of sensory data, like light hitting your eyes, sound waves in your ears.
It's like almost like being in a sensory deprivation tank.
Kinda. But instead of nothingness, it's like this constant bombardment of raw data that our brains have to, like, decode.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So how does the brain make sense of all that chaos? Well, Seth says it uses its past experiences, its knowledge, to make these informed guesses.
So it's not just absorbing, it's actively trying to predict what's going to happen next.
Bingo! And those predictions actually shape how we perceive the world.
That's wild.
It is. Like, remember that visual illusion with the two shaded squares?
Oh, yeah, the ones where they're the same shade of gray but look totally different because of the shadow. Right.
Yeah, that's the one.
Even when I know they're the same color, my brain's like, nope, they're different.
Right. It's like a trick, but not really.
Yeah.
It's actually your brain making a prediction. It knows shadows make things appear darker, so it adjusts what you see, even though the actual information is the same.
So our brains are kind of filling in the blanks based on what they expect to see.
Totally. They're creating this more coherent, more predictable world based on our past experiences.
Makes sense, but also kind of freaky when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Another great example is that distorted audio clip, you know, the one
Remind me.
where all you hear is noise at first and then someone tells you what the sentence is.
Oh, right, right. And then suddenly you can hear the words, even though the sound hasn't changed.
Exactly. Because once you know what to expect, your brain uses that information to fill in the gaps and make sense of the noise.
I remember thinking, like, how did my brain not hear that before?
Right. It shows how powerful those predictions can be.
So, okay, our brains are these prediction machines, constantly making these educated guesses. But where does consciousness actually fit into all of this? Like, how does that work?
Well, here's where Seth really drops the bombshell. He calls perception a kind of controlled hallucination.
Wait, hold on. You're saying everything we experience, see, hear, feel is a hallucination?
In a way, yes. It's not that the world isn't real, but our experience of it is a construction created by our brains.
Whoa, okay, so does that mean reality isn't real at all?
Not quite. The key here is controlled. These hallucinations are constantly being checked against real-world feedback.
Right.
So we're not just hallucinating whatever we want. Our brains are still bound by, like, the laws of physics and stuff.
Okay, so it's like our brains are making this virtual reality simulation, but it's one that's constantly being adjusted based on what's actually happening around us.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It works because, for the most part, the world is pretty predictable.
Right.
We've evolved to anticipate those regularities, and our brains have become really good at making these models.
Okay, this is making me think about people who have, like, actual hallucinations.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with schizophrenia or things like that.
Yeah.
Is that like their prediction engine going off the rails?
It's complicated, but there are definitely some interesting connections. Actually, Seth did this study using VR and that Google Deep Dream algorithm. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, like,
They basically turned the campus at Sussex University into this bizarre psychedelic world filled with dogs everywhere.
wait, seriously? Like, dogs everywhere you looked?
Yeah, it was meant to simulate what happens when predictions get too strong and overwhelm the actual sensory data.
Oh, I get it.
Like, when that happens, you can start experiencing things that aren't really there.
So, in a way, we're all hallucinating all the time.
Kind of.
But most of us are good at keeping it in check.
Exactly. We agree on our hallucinations, and that's what we call reality.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get this.
Good. But here's where things get even wilder. Seth also argues that the self, like our experience of being a unique me, is also a controlled hallucination.
Now, hold on a minute. Illusions? Okay, I can sort of wrap my head around that. But myself, this whole sense of me is a hallucination.
It might sound crazy, but think about it. How do you know you have a body? How do you experience the world from your perspective? How do you feel like the same you over time?
I mean, I guess I never really stopped to think about it.
Right. And what's fascinating is that those different parts of the self can actually come apart. There are people with brain injuries, for example, who lose their sense of body ownership or feel like their actions aren't their own.
So you mean this me feeling isn't as solid as it seems?
Exactly. It's this construction that's constantly being updated by our brains.
So it's like we're making up our sense of self too.
In a way, yes. And like any other perception, it's based on predictions and inferences.
Okay, I need an example here because this is getting pretty out there.
Have you ever heard of the rubber hand illusion?
Rubber hand illusion, okay. You mentioned it before, but to be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's pretty trippy. Basically, it's this experiment
Okay.
where they hide your real hand and put this fake rubber hand in front of you, and then they stroke both hands at the same time with the brush, but you're looking at the rubber hand.
So it'd be like seeing this fake hand being touched, but feeling it on my real hand. That sounds kind of weird.
It is. What happens is, after a while, people start to feel like the rubber hand is actually their own hand.
Really? Just from seeing and feeling the touch at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Like my brain wouldn't know which hand was real anymore.
Exactly. It shows how the brain tries to make sense of conflicting information.
It makes you wonder what else our brains are like tricking us into believing.
Oh, all the time. But in this case, it's because your brain is trying to create this single coherent experience, even if that means kind of bending the rules a bit.
So because I'm seeing the rubber hand being touched and feeling it on my skin, my brain's like, well, that must be my hand then.
Yep. It prioritizes what makes sense visually, even if it contradicts your internal sense of where your hand is.
Internal sense. Is that like proprioception?
Exactly. Proprioception is your body's sense of where it is in space. Like how you know where your arms and legs are without having to look. It comes from sensors in your muscles and joints.
Okay, so in the rubber hand illusion, what I'm seeing and feeling overrides that internal sense.
Exactly. The visual and tactile information is just so strong it takes over.
Wow, that's pretty wild. And there are different versions of this illusion, right?
Oh, yeah. There's one where they make the virtual hand flash in sync with your heartbeat.
No way. And that makes it feel even more like your own hand.
Yeah, because now it's connected to your internal rhythms, not just external sensations.
Okay, this is starting to creep me out a little
I
bit.
know, it's kind of freaky.
It's like, how much control do we even have over our sense of self?
It's a good question. But this malleability isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
It's actually what allows us to adapt to new situations.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Like our sense of self needs to be flexible to some extent, right?
This is making me super aware of my body right now.
Yeah.
Like suddenly I can feel everything.
It's funny how learning about this stuff can change how you experience your own body, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
But speaking of body stuff, you mentioned something earlier, interoception.
Oh, right. That's another crucial piece of the puzzle when it comes to understanding the self.
Okay, break it down for me.
Basically, interoception is our sense of the internal state of our bodies. So things like your heart rate, your breathing, temperature, hunger.
So not the outside world, but what's going on inside.
Exactly. It's about sensing what's happening inside us, not outside of us.
Okay, so like when my stomach growls, that's interoception.
Yeah. Or feeling your heart racing when you're nervous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But why is that so important for the self?
Because it's all about keeping us alive. Think about it. We don't usually sense our individual organs unless something's wrong, right?
That's true. I guess I don't walk around feeling my spleen or anything.
Right. Interoception is less about, like, knowing every detail of your insides and more about providing feedback to keep everything running smoothly.
So it's kind of like the behind-the-scenes stuff that keeps our bodies going.
Exactly. It's about regulation, maintaining that balance, what they call homeostasis.
I'm starting to see how this all ties back to the self.
Yeah.
It's like our basic experience of being a body is rooted in these internal signals.
It's like we predict ourselves into existence from the inside out.
That's a great way to put it. So if this whole sense of self is a controlled hallucination, what does that mean for, like, everything else?
Like what?
Like how we think about mental health, artificial intelligence, even just what it means to be human?
Those are some big questions.
Yeah.
Ones we should definitely explore further.
Okay, so we've been talking about this idea that consciousness, even our sense of self, is like this best guess that our brain makes.
Right, based on predictions and sensory information.
But what are the big implications of all this? Where do we even go from here with this knowledge?
Well, Seth talks about how this view of consciousness could really change the way we think about mental health.
Oh, interesting.
He suggests that a lot of mental health conditions could be understood as prediction errors.
Prediction errors, like when those predictions go wrong.
Exactly, like when the brain's predictions about the world or even about itself don't match up with reality.
That's fascinating. So instead of just focusing on the symptoms, you could look at what's causing those prediction errors in the first place.
Yeah, it could lead to completely new ways to treat and prevent mental health issues, not just manage them.
Hmm. Can you give me an example? Like, how would a prediction error look in real life?
Sure. Think about someone with, say, social anxiety.
Okay.
They might constantly predict that social interactions will go badly, so they avoid them altogether.
Got it.
So their brain is basically creating this, like, distorted model of social reality based on faulty predictions.
Oh, wow. I get it.
And therapy could then focus on helping them recalibrate those predictions.
So they can actually engage with people without all that fear and anxiety.
Exactly. By understanding these underlying mechanisms, we could develop much more targeted and effective treatments.
That's pretty incredible. It really changes how you think about mental health.
Yeah, it's a whole new perspective.
But what about artificial intelligence? Everyone's
Right.
talking about AI these days. Does this whole controlled hallucination thing tell us anything about whether AI could ever become conscious?
Well, Seth makes this really important point
What's that?
that consciousness isn't just about processing information. It's about being a biological organism, you know?
Okay.
Our experience of consciousness is deeply tied to the biological stuff that keeps us alive.
So just building more powerful computers won't necessarily make them conscious.
Exactly. It's not like flipping a switch.
That's kind of a relief, to be honest.
Yeah,
The whole idea of sentient robots always freaked me out a little.
I get it.
But if consciousness is so tied to biology, does that mean humans are the only ones who have it? What about animals?
Another good question. Seth is really clear that human consciousness is just one way to be conscious.
Okay.
There's probably a huge range of different kinds of consciousness out there, and other creatures likely have their own unique experiences.
So the way we experience the world might be just one tiny version of consciousness out of many.
Exactly. Who knows what other forms of consciousness might exist? It's kind of mind-blowing, right?
It really is. It makes you realize how little we actually know.
Yeah.
So just to recap, we've learned that our brains are these prediction machines, creating this model of reality that we experience as consciousness.
Right.
And that includes our sense of self, which is also kind of a controlled hallucination tied to our biology.
And this whole view has big implications for understanding things like mental health, AI, and the vast spectrum of possible consciousnesses out there.
It's a lot to take in, but it's also super exciting.
I know, right? It makes you question everything you thought you knew about, like the nature of reality.
It really does. And Anil Seth's work has definitely given me a whole new way of looking at what it means to be human, to experience the world.
It's pretty remarkable. And it leaves us with this question. If our experience is so constructed, so dependent on our brains, what other aspects of reality might we be completely missing?
That's a great question, and one that I think will stick with me for a while. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another fascinating